Hello and welcome to Fierce. This program celebrates the diversity of LGBTIQ identities and perspectives. Fierce is produced in Bundjalung Country at 2NCR Lismore and can also be heard on podcast at fiercefm.podbean.com and in New Zealand on Fresh FM, as well as all over Australia through the Community Radio Network.
Fierce FM on Spotify and YouTube. I want to honour the traditional owners of the lands where you are living. They took care of these lands for thousands and thousands of years and then shared this land with us at great cost to their own lives. I want to thank them for the care they have given and continue to give, to sit on the earth, listen and care for country. I also want to thank the fairies and crones who came before us in history to fight for our human right to love fiercely.
Cassy Judy from Sydney, a gorgeous singer-songwriter. Listeners can find you on YouTube. Just type in Cassy Judy and you'll find lots of links.
That's right.
Look at you! Oh, I love this! Did you get that specially made, or is that something that you just found in a shop?
Yeah, there's an Indigenous woman who runs her own business in Melbourne, House of Dizzy. She made it for me. Lauren Hill wears her earrings and she's done it all herself, you know, she's an inspiration.
When you're not writing or performing or making videos, you're doing criminal law with people.
Yes, I help people who are charged with criminal offences. I started doing that about 15 years ago in Broken Hill with the Aboriginal Legal Service, and I get to work alongside public lawyers who are doing law. I mean, for me, it's like an expression of social justice. So it's not an easy job. It has its ups and downs. It's never boring.
What got you into the criminal law?
Looking for meaning within law as anything else. I knew I didn't want to be a commercial lawyer, and I kind of tried that out. I remember being in one of those big city offices and just looking out. On a clear day in Sydney, you can see beyond the Blue Mountains, and I wanted to go and work with the Aboriginal Legal Service in Walgett or in Broken Hill. So I just kind of kept looking out there going, okay, well, what's out there? And I kind of think a movie like Priscilla, that imagery at some level, I was like, oh, okay, when I'm out there, when I'm far away from everything and everyone, I'll really get to what I need to find. And I didn't in that point, but it was definitely an incredible journey of growth and, importantly, connection with Indigenous communities out there. I'll never forget those experiences, like driving around in the Aboriginal Legal Service Holden Commodore with a plastic box full of files next to a garbage bag full of kangaroo meat.
The frozen kangaroo tail in the plastic wrap.
No, this was like fresh killed off the mallee. Like one of my colleagues would go around and visit families and get a bag of meat that had been hunted. So it was interesting to me to see how people supplemented whatever income they had, more traditional forms of hunting.
Well, that shows a bit about your character. I remember watching you at Trans Glamour, and the question was asked, if you were given $1 trillion, what would you do with it? And you just said, I'll throw it in the air.
Yeah, I do remember saying that. Wow, you were there. Cool.
Interesting answer.
I think it was the Dalai Lama who said, you know, the more you have to worry about. And I've been watching this documentary on Netflix called The Defiant Ones, and Tupac Shakur was just, you know, railing against inequality and railing against one person having $36 million. Like, does one person really need that much money? It's something that I feel is an important social issue, but I'm 41 and I've been looking at social issues for 20 years and I'm like, wow, have we done anything to fix inequality? You know, it's like one step forward, 2 steps back.
I'm coming forward. You said you're 41. It's like, oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I am.
You look like you're in your 20s. There's a backstory for you, Cassy.
Yeah, let's go back. I grew up in botany. I went to Catholic schools. I was sent to an all-boys high school. Women were like, you know, this other species, like a revelation to me at university. So I kind of, you know, went through life to a certain point just doing things that everybody does until I couldn't do that anymore. What's going on here? Something's not right. You know, I've tried all these things, but nothing seems to stick emotionally. So, yeah, I went looking deeper and, you know, I found myself. I found a woman. Thank God for that.
Yeah. That could mean so many things to different people. It would have started in childhood, I imagine.
Yeah, I think there was a moment when all these little things that I'd kind of filed away in my subconscious just clicked into place. And I was like, oh, that was why when I wasn't included in the women's issue, it really cut me deeply in a way that I could not express. So there were all these moments that had led up to that point. It was just like, oh, everything just makes sense. There was really a moment where I started presenting as a woman before hormones or anything. I'd had a workplace experience that didn't go that well. And I was like, oh no, this is too hard. I'm going to present as androgynous now. So there's literally two piles of clothes on the floor, like the pile of women's clothing and this black, colorless, lifeless pile of clothes. In that sense, it wasn't much of a choice. The pile of women's clothes was bright and shiny and happy. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but once I put on those clothes and put on some heels and walked out the door, it was no going back.
The gender binary is important to a lot of our population. Obviously, they feel like if there's not that binary, then perhaps there's no foundation for them. And they get very scared and they want to go out and vilify, abuse, hurt trans or gender fluid people.
Yeah.
So the work you're doing in criminal law, is that a lot to do with people who are gender diverse?
I represent people from everywhere. If Legal Aid wants to give your matter to me, happy to take it, happy to help you. It's interesting because we've come so far. Even in my own journey, I run a Facebook group called Trans Awareness Australia. And at some point, I got some feedback from a member saying, hey, your group only seems to cater to trans people who are taking hormones and getting surgery. What about those of us who know we're trans, are happy with that and aren't necessarily pursuing that path? And I was like, oh yeah, duh, of course. You know, we need to be as inclusive as we can as a community. Having said that, I'm sure there's places in our country that maybe aren't safe or where people have attitudes that are hurtful and I think dangerous to the mental health of people in our community. Hopefully as that light grows stronger, then it finds its way into the dark corners. But I also think as much as we can be visible and our true selves, then that helps because it might reach someone there who's quiet and internal and has certain thoughts and feelings, but they can't verbalize them. And so when they see something that's expressive, like all the moments in popular culture where I, growing up, saw expressions of trans identity in popular culture, but I didn't know it.
The ones that we saw, they were all murderers or pedophiles or murdered. Did you see positive?
I think in Priscilla, the treatment of the issue of trans identity, who's a trans woman who's falling in love with a man and is utterly terrified, and even the playfulness around it, you know, shut up and eat your hormones. It's awesome. It's great. I just think they nailed it. It will reach the people that it needs to reach. But I take your point, like, that Netflix documentary, disclosure, I really like Jim Carrey, but I don't want to watch Ace Ventura, the sequel now after seeing that, because I agree with the stuff that Laverne Cox was saying. Some of the representation of trans people in Hollywood and shows that I grew up watching like NYPD Blue definitely makes me think twice about revisiting those works and underscores the importance of us trying to represent ourselves in a positive kind of way.
The rate of attempted suicide is 50% amongst gender diverse people in our country.
Yeah, I think just this week, the independent MP Alex Greenwich in the New South Wales Parliament passed a motion which basically talked about the disadvantage and the difficulties that trans and gender diverse people face. And I was like, what does this mean? AJ Brown from Trans Pride Australia was like, well, this is a start. We're trying to build a consensus and build support in Parliament to try and then maybe go for something more significant like birth certificate reform, you know, which they have in Victoria. But for some reason in New South Wales, we're just not as progressive as Victoria. When the Rudd government was in power, they passed a series of guidelines for federal government departments. The upshot of that was that you could go and get the gender marker on your passport changed with a letter from your GP saying that you're undergoing treatment for transition to a new gender. Whereas the legislation in New South Wales still provides that you need to have had some form of surgery for that to happen. So I think the federal model is gentler and less intrusive and more respectful of the wide range of journeys that trans and gender diverse people are going to undertake. So Ideally, we'll see more and more states moving towards that kind of model.
I want to go to one of your songs, but I noticed that you don't write songs about this stuff. More about connecting with other humans, I think, or else the ocean. But you're not scared of sharks.
No, I'm not. I really love sharks. Humans do, I suppose, more harm to sharks than we do. And sometimes I might feel fear, which is probably more about what I've heard on the news. There might have been an attack close to my area. There was a couple of years ago, a woman swimming alone at dusk. But yeah, I'm a really adventurous person and I'm good at pushing myself. So that might mean I swim around an island on my own one day. But as a proportion of the number of swims that I've done and the number of times I've seen sharks, it's disappointingly low.
Is there any parallel between sharks and lawyers?
Good question. Some lawyers might not have a good reputation. Fortunately, the culture that I've experienced from day dot as a criminal lawyer has been very helpful and supportive and collegiate. And I think it needs to be, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with people who might have a drug issue or an alcohol issue, an untreated mental health, or they don't have enough support, or they're in rhythms or habits that aren't really working for them. They're getting them into trouble in the criminal justice system. You know, that's tough. That's emotional labor of a sort. We're really, we're pretty good with one another. It's pretty helpful collegiate culture.
Oh, hey, Cassy, how you going?
Oh, I'm okay. I don't think we'll be surfing today.
Why not?
Heading down that back road, looking for hungry head. Down the road we're traveling, I hope she's a barreling. Gone are the days when the girls just used to watch. Nowadays we kick it up a notch. But we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. Great White and Hammerhead, Wobbegong, Port Jackson. Black tip and white tip, whale, shark and grey nurse. But we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. Because there's too much east in the nor'easter. There's too much east in the nor'easter. Isabel Latham inspired Pam Burridge, Pauline Mensah and Wendy Botha, Sally Fitzgibbon and Lane Beachley. A woman's place is on her surfboard, but we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. No, we won't be surfing today. Because there's too much east in the nor'easter. There's too much east in the nor'easter. I can feel the spray off the back of that wave. I can feel the spray right in my face.
Hi, my name's Cassy Judy. I'm a transgender woman, Sydney-based singer-songwriter, and you're listening to Fierce FM with Peterlehner. Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. I was up at sunrise, I was in the water. I felt a bit like a motor vehicle because I put Vaseline on my body so the water would beat up as I was coming out of the water. I'm like a freshly waxed BMW.
Was it just filmed on a phone, or did you have a crew there? Or
one guy from Wollongong, Matt Weissel, he's very good. He just has one of those little cameras. With the running scenes, he's walking back, trying not to fall over the rocks. Yeah, and I was able to get some of the people from my swimming group involved in the video as well. It was a lot of fun. And that cube, people call it Rubik's Cube, but the nickname for it's actually Stormy because it sits above a stormwater drain. Here we were doing this video on a really cold morning and I'm getting this fabulously warm draft of air coming up through the cube. So that was nice.
Sewerage warmth, no less. So,
I know, right?
Let me ask you about love.
Love, yeah, sure.
Is that, I'm sure that filmmaker fell in love with you, filming you like that.
Oh, wow, he didn't declare it. He wouldn't even let me buy him a hot chocolate.
Did you put all your love into the camera? I mean, it looked like you did.
Yeah, look, I'm a performer. I like being on camera. I'm comfortable with the spotlight. That's how I am.
Before transition, were you comfortable in front of the camera?
Yeah, I think so. I can sort of see, like, I think before transition, I just had these two creases here and they kind of went away after that, which was good.
Wow, that's what I need to do.
Transition.
What are these graces? We're indoctrinated into this gender binary where you see all these films and movies about love and we sort of programmed to really want that romantic connection. But because you were in an all boys school at the time and women were like, you didn't really get to know them or see them, were you attracted to women? Are you still attracted to women? What's it like for you, love?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. I guess it was that thing that people often struggle with is that I didn't understand the difference between gender and sexuality. So I conflated the two and I thought, oh, well, yeah, I'm just a heterosexual guy. And I guess that moment of realization, I was in a club, I was wearing a wig, there was some guy, he's dancing close. He can tell I'm not interested. And he says to me, are you a lesbian? And I'm like I'd never, like it just occurred to me in that moment. I'm like, yeah. It was a relief. It was peace. And then, you know, understanding that as my identity, then there's a whole new world to explore. A world of U-Hauls and turkey basters and drama, all the stereotypes. What's not to love?
Tell us, for you, the difference between gender and sexuality.
Gender is how you feel you are as a person, and sexuality is who you want to be with, who you feel attracted towards romantically and sexually. So in terms of the difference between gender and sexuality, I think it's really important for people to be able to wrap their heads around trans identity, because otherwise they get confused. They're like, oh, well, you're a woman now. Yep, I can accept that about you. Where's your boyfriend? And I'm like, well, no. You know, there's this island in Greece called Lesbos. That's my place. That's where this thing is going. And they're like, what? Lesbos? What are you talking about? It can be hard for people of different generations and from different cultural backgrounds to understand the complexities and the nuances. My dad in particular, you know, it was hard for him to come to accept. It was hard for my mum. Culturally, there's maybe a different vibe around having a son because there's all this sort of weight of expectation and, you know, being smart, then there's an extra layer to it.
Do you have a monogamous or an open relationship? Or are you single?
I'm single. I've been single for a while now. I spend a lot of time swiping, but I think I've just gotten used to those matches happening. And on Tinder, it's like, oh yeah, do people even write to each other? Like, so I've gotten used to matches happening, but what I'm looking for is a tennis match, for that interest to be matched. and returned, or for a spark to happen. And I know that can happen online before you meet. And so it's just maybe a case of waiting or going, okay, well, that's just not going to happen at this point in my life. There's this French singer called Claude Francois, and there's this song of his called I Know. And there's a line in his song, I must face lonely years.
I know I must face lonely years.
So that line keeps coming to my mind. To be honest with you, having said that, this is actually a time in my life where I seem to be receiving a lot more love from friends and dogs in a way that's really nice and I'm really enjoying. So I definitely wouldn't want to get ensconced and immersed in a relationship and lose myself and get so caught up in that defines my existence, because actually not being in a relationship at the moment gives me more time and energy to devote to different projects.
Feels like that you've had such a strong upbringing. You're such a strong person. Was your family life supportive of you however you were?
I was definitely acknowledged in my family for my intelligence, and I was given a lot of freedom to explore lots of different things. My family background's Italian, so I have a strong sense of love and connection with my family. A strong sense of connection to my culture. Occasions were important. Food was important. My dad, an amazing handyman and chef and storyteller, you know, a very interesting person himself who grew up in Egypt and lived all these different lives in the Middle East and in Belgium before he came to a racist 1950s Australia that he found quite hard to adapt to. Now I'm in a house that my grandparents bought in what was once working class botany, full of factories. You know, my grandfather used to work in a skin factory and botany used to smell. No one wanted to live here. There's so many factories, the place stunk. When there used to be 4 banks down at the local shops, now there's gyms and cafes and beauticians. It's definitely changed a lot.
I wonder if you're like a shark, because you seem to be able to swim slowly through the water, enjoying it all. Nothing's going to come and get you in any way because you're just there. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like you've got this aura around you where you can go places and do things without having to be in fear.
Thank you. That's such a profound thing to say. I've always lived life that way, and I did a bit of traveling before I transitioned. Like, I was in Cuba and Mexico, and I would walk through the most dangerous neighborhoods, almost as a point of, no one's going to tell me what to do. Don't tell me where I can and can't go, you know? And police cars, you know, in Cuba, they'd stop and they'd say, look, you're a tourist. You shouldn't be here and you shouldn't do this. When I transitioned, I sort of said to myself, look, I don't want to be inhibited by being a woman. But I have to say, on the other side, yeah, there's a lot more fear and a lot more anxiety. So there's a gorgeous park near here. I might still go for a walk late at night in that park, but I do feel a bit afraid. And I did write to the local council and say, hey, can you put some lights in, please? You know, that would really help actually make it safer. I feel there's bad stuff in the world, but the more good stuff that we can create and join in together, then hopefully that creates a whole. I'm sure you'd know, being a choir leader, a whole that is bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I definitely see that in you. It put out there images that are empowering of and for gender diverse people, because there's so many that aren't. And so anything that is really, really good. And you're doing it with comedy. Have you ever done stand-up?
I think about doing it. I'd like to try it.
Yeah. I interviewed Bob Down last week. He was saying how he's expecting to see lots of trans TV presenters coming through very soon. So there's a head up for you. You're perfect for the job.
Thanks. I would love that job.
I know. You'd be good at it.
Thank you. How do I do that? How do I make that happen? Where are the avenues?
Yeah, well, hand it over. It'll happen. We're going to go out with one last song that's been with you in your life that you love and it still means something to you.
It's like the first song. It's like a really early childhood memory of being in the car, my mum listening to commercial radio, and What's Love Got to Do With It coming on. Hearing Tina Turner for the first time and going, wow, a woman can sound like that.
What's love got to do with it? If that was a question, what's the answer, Cassy?
Wow, that's so good. It's funny because you can have lyrics stored in your head, but you don't always think about them. Oh my God, it's almost an ironic question, isn't it? Because
Love is all there is.
Yeah, exactly. Love is central and important, and it's what we need as humans to feel valued and survive and thrive. I need to give myself a hug.
Thank you so much, Cassy. See you on
Thank you so
TV.
Thanks again. Thank you for having me, Fierce FM. Go Lismore, Bunjalung country.
Yeah.
You must understand, oh, the touch of your hand makes my pulse react. And it's only the thrill of boy meeting girl, all the sense I tried is physical, only logical. You must try to ignore that it means more than that. Oh, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a second-hand emotion? What's love got to do with it? Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? May seem to you that I'm acting confused when you're close to me. If I tend to look dazed, I read in some place I've got cause to be. There's a name for it. There's no place that be. But whatever the reason, you do it for me. Oh, what's love got to do with it? What's love but a second-hand emotion? What's love got to do with it? Who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? I've been taking on a new direction, and I have to say, I've been thinking about my own protection. It scares me to feel this way. Oh, what's love got to do with it?
Thank you for listening to Fierce. This program celebrates the diversity of LGBTIQ identities and perspectives. Fierce is produced in Bunjalung country at 2NCR Lismore and can also be heard on podcast at fiercefm.podbean.com and in New Zealand on Fresh FM, as well as all over Australia through the Community Radio Network.
Fierce FM on Spotify.